hopeful that the FMAP program that Rick mentioned kind of does the same thing. I mean, it's kind of in its infancy stages. We haven't really seen the money come out yet, but I'm hopeful that once these farmers get that money, you'll see how they react and how they, this is their livelihood. They've got a lot of skin in the game, and they're not going to walk away from this money and put it to great use. So I think one of the things we need to do with the governor is make sure he understands how important the subventions program was, celebrate all these accomplishments, and hopefully that'll kind of pull the FMAP and other programs that may impact flood control in the future into that realm. The next comment I wanted to make had to do with multi-benefit projects. That's this gorilla in the corner there that's waiting for us, that we've got to push for multi-benefit projects. And one of the things we've done in the Delta, and specifically the levees program, is not totally, but a portion of our habitat development has been on a programmatic basis. And like I said, the Delta levees transition from more riverine type to tidal areas, and so did the concerns regarding habitat and what you can do on these levees. And there's a nice report called A Delta Renewed that discusses the differences in these levees and what kind of habitat improvements you can make on them or within them. And it's very pertinent because the number one priority in the Delta Renewed is that the agricultural economy has to be sustainable. They realize without the farmers, there's no money to maintain levees which help protect the habitat or actually house the habitat. And so that's going to be real important as we move on. Can we develop partnerships that can put the habitat where we have the opportunity and not force every project to have multi-benefits on its own. The next thing I want to talk about are the LOI SWIFT's working on. These PIRs came out 6 years ago, and they just knocked us flat. We had no idea what they even were, and then when it turned out that if we don't clean this up, you're out of the PL 99 program, that just shocked us. And we have to give credit to the board because you guys helped us, one, help the Corps reduce the number of items that were graded on, and that was huge. And then two, once you realized that we were going to have difficult coming up with the LOI SWIFT, you reached out to us in the past couple of years, especially President Edgar and Officer Gallagher, and really convinced our clients that you guys are in it to help us. And that was huge. And even though a lot of our clients haven't signed the OMR&R agreement, they are committed to doing OMR&R. They just didn't want to have to sign that agreement. They've actually done their Prop 218 work ahead of time. They're ready to spend some money. A lot of them have been doing RR&R. We haven't called it that. We just called it keeping the levees up because sometimes we had some problems out there that really needed the district to step up beyond the regular O&M. So we appreciate the fact that you're helping us, and we ask you to continue helping us as we implement the SWIFTs, because that's going to take a lot of effort and money. And as you know, a lot of the problems are encroachments, which you guys are the ones that administer the encroachment program. Another benefit of Prop 1E was the emergency response money that came out. That really helped levee districts for a couple reasons. One, I don't know of many levees that didn't experience problems in past floods where it took a human action to keep that levee from failing. And by funding the emergency response money, one, we got to memorialize a lot of the areas that we do have problems so future trustees can come in and know where their levee problems are. And two, it's provided emergency supplies for us and training and that sort of thing. I mean, just this week I was talking to a client, and they're fairly new to the Delta, and try to describe what it looks like when a beaver den starts flowing water at high tide and it's coming out like a fire hydrant. And if you don't stop that, your levee's gone. I mean, almost every island in the Delta can give you a horror story like that. If somebody hadn't stopped by, saw that leak, taken care of it, those levees would be gone. The next item is working collaboratively with stakeholders. That's exactly what the governor wants to do, and like I said, my clients are interested in working together. In fact, coming up, we've got through the Delta Conservancy a meeting set up to talk about Elk Slough. Elk Slough, which is bordered by state plan of flood control levees, right now is mostly a backwater slough, and there's been talk about returning that to fresh water coming from the Sacramento River. And so our clients are supporting a project to look into whether that's feasible. And so we're meeting with the Delta Conservancy, some environmental groups and agencies, and the flood districts to kind of come together and see if we can work on a project that benefits everybody. And that's the kind of stuff that really goes a long way, is when you bring these stakeholders in early, they can take part and be part of the solution. And then the last thing, I think Mr. Bear talked about it, was we need to really get real about sea level rise and climate change. Every time I hear sea level rise, I hear, well, the Delta's going to fall apart because the Golden Gate's going to go up 5 feet or 10 feet or whatever the latest number is. And in reality, we know that sea level rise will impact only a certain area of the Delta because it tends to peter out as you go upstream. And recently, there was I think last year, DWR put together some new estimations of flood frequency diagrams for the Delta, where they took the CV-fed hydraulics and hydrology through the Delta and then added sea level rise. And the results were pretty encouraging, because it does show how the sea level rise effect peters out. And also, even though we're going to get a lot more water in the Delta from the new hydrology, it's such a huge bathtub, it doesn't really change the main part of the Delta that much as far as rise, maybe half a foot, which is kind of what we had thought all along. And so once we get numbers like that, I don't know if those numbers are correct now, but at least we have something to plan for, and that's the key, is if we can get the programs consistently funded and we can plan for the future, these levee districts will step forward and do their part to help you take care of your levees. That's all I have, and if you have any questions.
Thanks very much, Gil. Any questions for Gil Casio? Very nice comments, very thoughtful. Appreciate it. Chris?
Thanks, Gil. We're going to move into larger parts of the system now, starting with the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency. Chris Elias. There you are. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, President Edgar, members of the board. Chris Elias is my name, with the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency, famously known as SAJAFCA. So delighted to be here this morning and invited to be a part of the listening session, and that you're listening to us. This is really great. I want to thank Mr. Swin for setting us up to be a part of this. And I wish we had additional insights, just like you were enunciating earlier, President Edgar, because this is a very fast-moving train in terms of what the overall outcome is. However, delighted to be here. And one of the things I also set up was we had kind of put together the presentation based on our understanding on what the water portfolio for the 21st century should look like, for the 21st century, and then from the perspective of our agency. And one of the things I did was to also then call one of our emerging partners, the American Rivers partner of ours, to join me as well. So this is a two-part presentation, but we'll make it very, very fast. So with that, I will roll into the first slide. So, okay, good. Thank you. So let me quickly remind you about the mission of SAJAFCA, then talk about how what we're doing on the ground really aligns with the direction that the governor is going. Obviously, it's not all the solutions, but we still have room to grow in terms of making sure that obviously that we're reflecting the direction that the governor is going, but this is a good start. And with that, this is SAJAFCA's boundary. So you may see then that, yes, this is in San Joaquin County, but it doesn't cover the entire county. However, as the second largest metropolitan area in our valley, SAJAFCA's boundary protects well over about 600,000 people in the San Joaquin area. So the only part that's missing there mainly are just basically Tracy and Lodi and Escalon and other small rural areas. But pretty much the Stockton metro area, along with other parts of unincorporated county, are in there. Then our mission is to reduce flood risk, for the cities of Stockton, just like said, and then as outlined in the statement, Manteca and the unincorporated part of the county. And we are governed by representatives who are elected officials from Board of Supervisors, city councils of Lathrop, Manteca, and Stockton. And then with respect then to our what we're doing to demonstrate that building up our portfolio for the 21st century, one of the things we did was to look at what are the three things that we're doing. And one of them obviously is infrastructure hardening. Then we're looking at our climate change adaptation policy, and then looking at multi-benefit opportunities. So this is our infrastructure hardening component. So earlier on, one of the things you talked about was, okay, what are the things that consist of opportunities that local agencies can take advantage of? Obviously, we are at the very bottom of the bathtub, and there are things happening upstream that we can't control, but we're still part of the system. Then basically looking at our reservoir operations opportunities with the New Hogan, or the on the upper part of the watershed, the San Joaquin part of the watershed. However, I wanted to just kind of address just simply that in terms of what's happening on the ground today, I highlighted there one of the gate structures which you approved not too long ago. That's the Smith Canal Gate Project. We came to you, we asked for your approval, of the local design agreement, as well as also issuing us an encroachment permit. That project is now underway, and I want to thank you for that effort, and then thank our partner agency, the Department of Water Resources, to get us this far. It's been a great journey, and we're just about ready to get into construction on this. So this is Smith Canal. So what you see there, basically to your right, is the gate structure we're trying to build. Why are we building the gate structure? Just to essentially protect the residents behind the gate. Where the levees, this is the length of the canal itself as to where it is located. And I wanted to kind of demonstrate why this we're building the levee system, improving the gate, building the gate rather. You can see that the levee system is fully encroached on. There's no other way to do much to protect the residents other than to look for a way to kind of back up closer to the main channel and then build a gate to protect those residents. We have well over 8,000 people in that area, 8,000 parcels in that area. That's about 24,000 people. So the plan then is to build a structure that protects them against tidal influence, but at the same time make sure that we account for sea level rise. So let me give you indication here as to how we're doing that. So this is before and after project, and then this is what we're doing today, to ensure that the project itself meets not just only FEMA, but addresses the SPFC standard, the SB5 requirement of 200-year flood protection. We added 3 foot of freeboard, and then, just for good measure, added additional 1.1 feet for hydraulic uncertainty, and then added additional 1.4 foot sea level rise addition to the top of the gate. Overall, we have 15 feet, of gate structure that will take care of eventualities between here and 2050. And that's where we are today, and this is how the gate operates. So this is the gate itself. So you see something, a boat coming back into the gate, so that once the water rises to 8 foot level, the gate itself runs. So, is there a way to animate this? Yeah, okay. It's supposed to animate so you can kind of see with the water rising what happens to the gate, and then allows the boat to get into the garage. But, just to spare you that, we can do that some other time. So here's just another project we are undertaking to, again, show hardening our infrastructure locally to take care of, again, protection of the residents in our area, while at the same time making sure that we're accounting for sea level rise. Again, 2 months ago, we came to you and then we asked for your support, for this project. Again, this is what you see is the boundaries of Jaffa. And then you have the Lower San Joaquin River project that covers North Stockton, Central Stockton, and then RD-17 area. Part of phase 1 was just basically the yellow and the red highlighted area, and our phase 2 is RD17. So we already have, the north part is already authorized project, and we're now working with our partner agency, the Department of Water Resources, to get us through a study so we can eventually enroll the RD17 into a formal study with the feds. So we're on the path, working with them right now to get all that going. I want to say thank you very much for your letter of support, the board to the Corps, encouraging them to welcome this approach. So here are the components of the project itself. Is a 40-mile levee system, and the BC ratio for this project is 7:1, so it's a very attractive project from federal perspective, and looking to protect well over 162,000 people and over 80,000 structures, and prevent $29 billion in damageable properties. And here's the milestones we kind of gone through already, but to build this, one of the things our board then had to struggle with was, yes, we're building for today. How about making sure that we don't have to come back to revisit this project for the next 50 years and longer? And the board adopted the policy. So you're asking, what can we do system-wide? What can we do individually to make sure that we are resilient? So the board just kind of go through what you have there on the policy. I'm just going to highlight the salient points. What the board is asking us to do is for any project we design to ensure that we have additional stage, in the system to handle in the future sea level rise, and inlet drainage, as well as the fast melting snow from the hills. And then that whenever the opportunity arises, in particular in the area we're studying right now, which is RD17 area, to purchase additional real estate. The intent there is to be able to account for increasing levee heights, because for every 3 foot, every foot you kind of rise, have to kind of look for additional 3 feet of girth, to allow for the strengthening of that levee system. Then to kind of continue to encourage our land use agencies to engage and be sure then that they're reflecting all these things in their revised general plan. And then our staff then to ensure that we engage, with your staff, looking at opportunities to either peer review or study, review what's going on with the hydrology, and then bring back the outcome of that study to basically adapt to future projects. And with respect then to system-wide improvements for ULOP resilience, we have Paradise Cut, and this is where I'm going to bring in Alicia Marcel, who is Associate Director of American Rivers, to speak briefly about the opportunities we're looking at in our area for multi-benefit opportunities. I do want to underscore that presentation by saying that our board hasn't taken a position yet on this presentation or the direction we're headed, whether we're going to support or provide more input. However, I've received the presentation myself and see the opportunities for integration, and Alicia and her team will be visiting our board to speak, to that as well. So with that, I'll just kind of pause briefly and have her come to the podium and then speak to the multi-benefit opportunities. Alicia?
Good morning, Board President and members of the board. My name is Aisha Masel. I'm with American Rivers. We're a national nonprofit working on river restoration. Before I get started in this presentation, I just wanted to say I'm part of a consortium of NGOs called the Flood Study Group. We're going to be present at a listening session in July, talking more about multi-benefit projects. I really appreciate what the President said about really looking at this vision statement, and I don't want to steal our thunder later, so I'm just going to focus on one project that you may have heard of before. It's called the Paradise Cut Project. This was actually in the Flood Protection Plan update in 2017, and it was one of 3 system-wide improvements that were recommended in that plan. And only one on the San Joaquin River. I do want to say that this project is not a silver bullet. I've been working on it for about 1.5 years, and there's some severe flood risks in the lower San Joaquin, as you all know. But I believe it's a cornerstone project for really reducing flood risk for communities downstream. So it's one of several projects we need to undertake. So with that said, this presentation, I think, is going to be just too long for the time period we have. So I'm going to fly through some slides. I apologize for that. If you want me to get more into detail, I welcome you to ask questions. I also have a bunch of materials I can send to you later that really delve into the details of this project. So just a quick overview. Which one did I provide? No, this one. Okay, thanks. So as you all know, Lower San Joaquin is very vulnerable to flooding. This is a photo of Manteca being flooded during 1997 flood event. Also, just as recently as 2017, 500 people were evacuated for danger of a levee breach in Manteca as well. There's increased urbanization risks. This was a map from 2006. Of course, urbanization has occurred record pace since then. And there's also climate change. So it's really a real problem. So just to give you an overview of where Paradise Cut is, this is a map of the Delta. The area that we're looking at, which is an existing Paradise Cut, is right there in the South Delta. And this is a kind of a blow-up of the plan as stated in the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. This is option M Ag, if you're all familiar with that. And what we did, American Rivers worked with the San Joaquin Resource Conservation District to really refine the conceptual plan. So if you just look at it conceptually, we're looking upstream, up the San Joaquin River, so from north to south. And the San Joaquin River is on the left, and Paradise Cut, the existing Paradise Cut, is right here. There's a weir, and there's an expansion area. The proposal is basically to add a new weir about 2.5 miles upstream of the existing weir and allow floodwaters to spread out over some annual farmland, annual crop farmland. Just to give you some context, the existing weir activates at about 16,000 cubic feet per second. The new weir that we're proposing activates at about 35,000 cubic feet per second. So this is really occasional inundation, less than 10% probability in any given year. And so, farming, of course, will be able to be continued on this land. And that was a key piece of this project. So American Rivers, along with RCD, the Resource Conservation District, applied for a grant from the Delta Conservancy. We supplemented that grant with some funds from the River Island Settlement Fund. And we had some very specific goals. We wanted to gain input from local stakeholders about this project. And when I look at the original grant, that was kind of at the end of a long list of things we needed to do. And it really became very clear, and what I want to focus our presentation on today is that we really need to engage local people in our project design from the very beginning. This was really the bulk of our work. And so I think that's really important. Earlier speakers said, locals are really willing to be part of the solution, but in order for them to be willing, we really have to address their concerns and bring them into the process. So we also wanted to quantify impacts and benefits and refine the conceptual design outlined in the flood protection plan. So our main goals are to reduce flood risk for urban areas as well as rural areas along the San Joaquin River. And we want to avoid or minimize the flood stage increases downstream of Paradise Cut. So this is really, what I mean by downstream is Grant Line Canal, Old River. These are people that would be impacted by higher flood stages. And, that I think is a really important piece. And as well, we improve habitat for native fish and wildlife. So this is all kind of in the context of a multi-benefit project. We produced a series of reports that are available to you or anyone in the public. I'll give my contact information at the end. So we did extensive hydraulic modeling. We have an existing conditions report. We developed a conceptual design technical memo that really gets into the details of what I'm about to show you, as well as some refined cost estimates produced by DWR and an overall permitting strategy. So I think I'm going to end on this slide just to keep this rolling. So I just want to show you a little bit about what the project entails and how it's different from what's outlined in the flood protection plan. So I'll focus on differences. If you look, is there a, there's a, so pointing at, you'll see I-5 kind of going right through the project area. And just below that is what we call the East Railroad, and then just above it is the West Railroad. So the East Railroad, originally there was a 500-foot opening underneath the trestle there, underneath the railroad. We reduced that to 250 feet, assuming that that would reduce a lot of costs. We also reduced the area of setback levees. As you all know, setback levees cost a lot of money. Just north of the Western Railroad, the setback used to kind of go in a straight line all the way to Bend 16, the kind of loop right there. There's a dairy farm right there, and so really moving that dairy would cost a lot of money, so we tried to reduce costs there as well. And then if you move upstream towards where upland, where the upper weir currently is, so that's at the bottom of the figure, we took out a setback levee. You'll see that it used to have a setback levee that went all the way to the Eastern Railroad levee. The existing topography allows us to basically minimize flooding. There are some additional land and structures that are flooded. Those are kind of the design elements that we chose. Just to kind of get through it, I'm not going to go through this, excuse me. We recently, so that was the result of our recent process. Through our local engagement, it really became clear that locals wanted to address the downstream impacts as part of the project, not as an add-on that maybe one day will happen in the future. And so our next phase, we just received a grant from the Delta Conservancy to go into phase 2 and really address what are downstream impacts and how to address them. So one of those is looking at how to reinforce the levees downstream using green approaches or sustainable approaches that was mentioned earlier, and also to build a robust local support. It's really clear that to move this project forward, we need a local champion. That's why we've presented this to Director Elias, and we'll be presenting to their board to see if they're willing to take on this project. And so with that, I'd like to end. I'll give you my contact information as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, very.
Darren,
Yeah.
are you going to switch presentations?
Yes.
Just real quick, I just wanted to, details aside, thank Chris and Aisha for the little update. This is a long-standing priority, and nothing's happened for a very long time, and there's a story there, but I'm really glad to see some renewed effort and some resources dedicated to it. So thank you guys for doing that, and looking forward to hearing what comes next. Appreciate the update.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you. And so we're going to bring it on home literally right now. Tim Washburn I can't even talk right now. Representing the Sacramento Flood Control Agency. Morning, Tim.
Mr. Edgar, members of the board, Tim Washburn, a SAFCA retired annuitant. I used to be the planning director of SAFCA. Now my assignment is to work on the next generation of projects for SAFCA that will carry us toward 500-year flood protection for the Sacramento area. And we believe it is an achievable objective and is linked to the two recommendations that I wanted to present to you today. And in the spirit, Mr. Edgar, of your opening and speaking on behalf of yourself, I should say I am speaking on behalf of myself with the general support of the management of SAFCA. So I presented these recommendations at the stakeholder gathering that you attended, but I thought I would read them again and maybe provide some context and answer any questions you may have. So these relate to, on the one hand, the Yola Bypass Cache Slough, and on the other, a concept of what we might do upstream in the American River watershed and the Cosumnes River watershed. So, the first recommendation is that the water resilience portfolio should identify the floodplain encompassed by the Yola Bypass Cache-Lou complex in Yolo and Solano counties as an area of significant state interest, where, consistent with the principles set forth in the executive order, a partnership of state, federal, and local agencies is currently implementing an integrated multi-benefit improvement program designed to advance critical elements.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not sure what my definition there is, Clyde, but important elements of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, the Delta Plan, the 2008 and 2009 biological opinions issued in connection with the operation of the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project, and the agricultural interests of the host counties. By highlighting the significance of the state's interest in this program, the resilience portfolio would encourage continued high-level cooperation between the state agencies participating in the partnership and support efforts by these agencies to secure state funding for this program. Now, I want to say this is not our final recommendation. We expect to work with your board, with DWR, and with others engaged in the Yola Bypass Cache-Lou partnership to make this a more focused recommendation. Our observation is there is enormous, as you know, from your participation in this effort and from your staff's participation, there is enormous opportunity for moving ahead with the program in the Yola Bypass Cache-Lou. We have 3 and potentially 4 very significant projects already sort of moving forward. The Lower Elkhorn Levee Setback Project, which is now being connected to the widening of the weir and the supplemental appropriations that SAFCA received, and that's fundamental to our SAFCA flood control program for Sacramento because it allows the higher flows down the American River that are part of our program for reducing risk on the American River to make their way out in the Yola Bypass. So that program is underway, environmental documents approved, we're into the right-of-way acquisition, and we're hopeful that that program is going to move forward this next year. There's also the Lookout Slough project in the Cache-Lou area that the state has put a lot of effort into moving forward, and that looks like that will go forward as well. And then we know the biological opinion project, the cutting of a weir into and a gate into the Fremont weir to allow fish to occupy floodplain habitat in the bypass. That one is moving forward as well. And then we have worked with the state and Solano County and other stakeholders to advance a project in the Egbert Tract at the very bottom of the bypass, and that also looks very promising. What's missing by our observation is a sharp state focus on moving these opportunities forward. I mean, we had Chris Chernell, and he played a critical role, or an important role, in bringing this partnership together, but he's now gone on assignment to become a deputy director, and our observation is the state has somewhat lost focus on the Yola Bypass Cache-Lou complex, and we want this portfolio to reestablish that focus, to create a program within the state to say, here's a place where we can make progress quickly, but it requires state focus, a state program, and state funding across the divisions of the state that are implicated, and that is flood management, the fish restoration program, the Division of Environmental Services. They're all in here, but not very well coordinated, and your board. So we need an effort to say, okay, the state's going to lead this. It has to get better at coordinating its various divisions and bringing the rest of the partners along. And so what we hope is, after some discussion, that the recommendation will take a sharper form and perhaps a more specific recommendation to the administration on how to move this program in the bypass forward. That would be our hope. That's my first recommendation. My second recommendation is, as we know, I mean, Sacramento not only faces flood risk along the Sacramento River, which is what the Yola Bypass Cache-Lou project would address, but it also has continuing risk on the American River. And of course, we've succeeded in modifying Folsom Dam, getting the Corps to implement a forecast-based water control manual, and now we're racing Folsom Dam. My next recommendation relates to how we go beyond where we are with those authorizations. Therefore, we call upon the resilience portfolio to support development of a multi-objective climate adaptation program in the American and Cosumnes River watersheds that would address the risk that climate change will produce more extreme floods, more prolonged droughts, and a long-term shift in the amount of annual precipitation falling as rain rather than snow. This would be accomplished by modifying Folsom Dam and the 3 largest dams in the American River watershed upstream of Folsom, and employing weather forecasting technology to reoperate these facilities in a manner that would allow excess winter and spring runoff to be temporarily stored at Folsom and conveyed down the Folsom South Canal for infiltration into the groundwater basins north and south of the Cosumnes River. This program would provide 500-year flood protection to the city of Sacramento, improve temperature and flow conditions along the lower American and Cosumnes rivers, stabilize groundwater levels supporting agriculture in southeast Sacramento County, and provide a source of dry year augmentation for municipal and industrial water users connected to the program. With support through the resilience portfolio, this program could serve as a model for climate adaptation efforts elsewhere in the Central Valley. So this is the kind of pilot project we're talking about. Now, if you thought the institutional alignment necessary to get the Yola Bypass Cache Loop complex going was tricky, the institutional alignment here is really tricky, because we have the Bureau of Reclamation, obviously the board, it implicates how we operate Folsom Dam, DWR, the counties, cities, the ag owners down in the Cosumnes Basin. It's very complicated, okay? But we've had some success in being able to accomplish these alignments, and I can tell you, while this one is, you know, I don't want to say it's anywhere close to where we are with the Yola Bypass Cache Loop, but the indications are very positive. People all understand. This makes a lot of sense. Okay, and what we're talking about here is, in order to ensure that we have the flood storage space in those 3 large reservoirs upstream of Folsom, and those are Hellhole and French Meadows, which are the PCWA reservoirs on the Middle Fork of the American and North Fork, and then we have Union Valley, the Smud Reservoir on the South Fork. Collectively, they can provide 200,000 to 300,000 acre feet of flood storage if we have the ability to evacuate that space based on a forecast. Right now, they can't do that. They don't have the outlet capacity to clear that space when we see the atmospheric river bearing down on us that looks like, whoa, this is going to even potentially exceed the capacity of what we've accomplished with Folsom and the downstream levee system. So this is our next increment of storage, and it gets us to the range of what's defined as the 500-year, 3-day volume for the American River watershed. But we have to modify the outlet works of those dams to make this possible. That's expensive. We're going to need state support to fund those things, and we're saying, okay, well, we're not going to fund it as a single-purpose project. We're going to do what the governor's asking and integrate it and incorporate it into a portfolio of other benefits. So how do you do that? Well, to make use of the additional storage, we'd say, well, let's go to Folsom. If we have an extra 200,000 or 300,000 acre feet of storage in the upstream reservoirs, we ought to be able to hold water in Folsom Dam in the winter and spring in the flood space, because we now have a hedge against the public safety risk of doing that. Now, we'd need your board support to do that. There's no way anybody could encroach into that space without the support of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board or SAFCA or DWR or what have you. But we're saying if it's offset by the upstream storage, it should be permissible to do that. And if we have the ability to do that, now we have the ability to manage the excess runoff of large but not extreme floods in the watershed. So we capture that water and we take advantage of the old Folsom South Canal, which has no particular function at this point. It was built for another purpose, but it serves a very potentially valuable purpose in allowing us to convey that water down the Folsom South Canal and get it in the ground, in the groundwater basin north of the Cosumnes River and south of the Cosumnes River. South of the Cosumnes River, we have a lot of ag land and are already underway with the Okeechobee Hartnell Water District in a pilot project to spread the water onto vineyards in their district, just north of the Cosumnes River and south of Dry Creek. And it looks very promising, as Lewis was saying earlier. The vineyards seem to do very well with getting wintertime inundation and spreading and still be able to get back under their growth cycle in the March-April timeframe. So we have about 1,200 to 1,500 acres participating in this initial pilot project. Now, albeit right now, it has to take the water out of the Cosumnes River and spread it, but if we can find a partnership with the Bureau of Reclamation here and be able to make water available down the Folsom South Canal. The Folsom South Canal runs right through the middle of this area, so we have an excellent opportunity to be able to take this excess floodwater in the American River, spread it out on the ground in the Cosumnes Basin. The other thing we're looking at is there used to be water delivery from the Folsom South Canal to ag lands in the Cosumnes Basin. So we're looking again at, well, where were those lands? And what connections did we have? And could we reconnect at least with some of those lands? And it was on the order of 7,000 acres. The infrastructure obviously would need to be reestablished, but quite a significant percentage of those lands are now vineyards. So another opportunity is water down the Folsom South Canal, spread out through the old Folsom South Canal service area and infiltrated into the ground there. And then we're also looking at the idea of putting dry wells. I don't know if you're familiar, these are just, large wells with gravel established, and you just put the water straight through them, and they can be placed into the right-of-way of the Folsom South Canal and also used as infiltration devices. So we think we actually have a very good concept here that needs proof of concept. And we're working with DWR's FloodMAR, Flood Managed Aquifer Recharge folks, to take this on and say, hey, here's a excellent example of the kind of integration, multi-objective, big idea thinking that the governor seems to be asking for. And we just happen to be blessed in our watersheds. We got Folsom Dam, the Folsom South Canal, and all the foundational work that we've done to get here with the new water control manual, now the acceptance of using weather forecasting as part of operation. You couldn't do this without that. And so we're really sort of targeting, okay, we're going to be back to updating the water control manual for Folsom Dam in maybe 2024-ish. When the raise is done, that's the time to be ready to bring this concept into the discussion and say, well, hey, how about as part of the update of that water control manual, we discuss this notion of conditional storage and use of the additional water for groundwater storage. So I think this is a pretty good idea. Of course, that's what I'm working on. I mean, I've been given great freedom to say, okay, go work on these ideas and see what you come up with. Okay, and so that's it. And I guess I should say, Bill, it's quite a pleasure to be back in this room. I think this is where we got started, 30 years ago or whatever. So,
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that's the concept.
Thank you, Tim.
All
That fits into this idea of working toward a single plan, don't start from scratch, but
Right.
use what we have and pilot projects.
So I promised I'd put one last thought. I didn't write it down into the mix here, and you heard me say this back at the Flood Management Association luncheon. This board is moving ahead on a feasibility study of creating, perhaps, using its old authority under the San Joaquin Drainage District to create a new assessment district. Okay, I'm not sure about the viability of that throughout the entire Central Valley. I do think there's an opportunity to do this in the lower Sacramento North Delta region. And I say that for this reason. We can't implement this bypass program without the ability to operate and maintain it. And right now, there is no source of operation and maintenance money other than the general fund for, those things linked to flood, and the water contractors for those things that are linked to theirs. We need a source of funding to operate and maintain the improvements that we're making in the bypass, And we believe an assessment district of the sort that could potentially be considered as part of your feasibility study could do that. And similarly, we feel burdened that Safeco has to pay the cost of operating and maintaining the improvements to Folsom Dam and potentially these improvements to upstream reservoir when those are system improvements. They are benefiting the whole system. And there is no reason why they shouldn't be operated and maintained as system improvements. And if your board were to consider taking this on to say, hey, that's a good idea, between, you know, if you're in the lower Sacramento, North Delta, I mean, who are we talking about? Sacramento, West Sacramento, the ag areas, and maybe a bit of Davis and Woodland. Well, if you made this attractive to Safeco and West Sacramento by taking on obligations that might otherwise, you know, have nobody to take them on, and in the context of moving those two urban areas toward 500-year flood protection, I think you could get support for it. And among the ag people, if you took on the responsibility of operating and maintaining the system improvements, the levees that constitute the system, and relieved them, who happen to be the neighbors of those levees, from that obligation, you'd probably get some support of them to say, okay, you know, it's going to be a plus and a minus, and it's going to come out not bad. And I think this is a workable concept. I know it's taking you a while to get this dang study going. I don't understand that all the time, but I really hope when you finally get this thing moving forward, it can be linked to these concepts. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Very, very thoughtful comments. Jim, I apologize that I didn't take a break for you, but if you give me 10 minutes with these four additional speakers, we'll end this and we'll take a lunch break, all right? We'll make up for the lack of break in the morning by a lunch break, which we'd do anyway. Sorry. Thank you, sir. Ron Stork, we have four cards that have been filled out regarding the listening session, so Ron Stork's first. No.
Ron Stork with Friends of the River, representing Friends of the River at the listening session. First of all, I think that you should know that we all know, back in the audience, that this board is great at listening. And I think that this board is one of the smartest, most experienced, and thoughtful boards that I have any regular contact with. So
Hey, Ron, what do
take
you
the
want?
compliment.
What do you want?
I'll move on. Obviously, President Edgar spoke for a lot of us in his introduction, and I wish to associate myself with 90% of what Bill's introduction said. And you guys will have to figure out the remaining 10. Obviously, the flood plan is an essential part of this board's work. And as a member of the flood study group and a whole bunch of people in this audience, we all kibitzed on that. And the fact that there was substantial consensus on the flood plan is an extraordinary achievement for all of us. And you are right that the flood plan in itself is already a big idea. It's obviously big because it's severely underfunded and also a challenge to implement. And also, I would also say incomplete. There are things that should be addressed by the flood plan that have not been, in part because it takes time to work through, in part because you kind of blanch at the numbers required, that is, the dollars required to pull this stuff off. You, I think, have done a good job on the levees and the bypass systems in the flood plan in the Sac Valley. And I think in the San Joaquin Valley, a more challenging system. I think that the plan is far more undeveloped and perhaps, well, for a lot of reasons. I think that
Bill is correct that you have a real opportunity with this administration to get the administration's attention. The Resources Secretary himself came from a foundation world as well as other worlds, and that foundation world has been showing considerable interest in this, in the flood plan and your work, and in the opportunities for melding environmental restoration with improvements to the flood control system. And that's a credit to the Resources Secretary for his past interest, and hopefully that interest will continue, and he certainly has the ear of the governor. So you are in charge of a critical part of the flood control system. Part of the flood plan, of course, involves reoperation of reservoirs, for which you have less direct responsibilities, and I think don't routinely come to grips with the issues associated with that. In the last WRDA, the Corps was authorized to accept contributed funds by dam owners to undertake revisions to their flood manuals. That certainly would be considered to be some kind of reoperation. Those revisions to flood manuals can be creative. I think you've just heard Tim demonstrate that, or perhaps less so. I think there's going to be opportunities to improve floodwater management in the system, and potentially other benefits as those flood plans come forward. But at the same time, you also have an interest on the part of dam owners to, how can I say this? You're taking too much of their reservoir in their minds, and you have to be cautious. You and the state and the Corps have to be cautious to make sure that the motivations to improve the conservation storage, i.e. the yield developed from wet reservoirs, does not threaten the flood control system. And this is an obvious example in the San Joaquin Valley, where you have the most challenges and reservoirs that are rather uncontrollable, in part because the floodway system downstream is not capable of taking waters that need to be released from conditional storage that may, be developed in these plans, or even reductions in flood control space, which I don't think would be a good idea, but for which there would be motivations. But in order for those plans to work, particularly in the San Joaquin Valley, they're going to have a place to put water that needs to be released, and those dams have generally fairly inadequate release capabilities, and often even more inadequate downstream floodways, or places simply to put the water. So those are going to be issues that demand some attention, and those attentions may be coming outside of your control as people attempt to implement the contributed funds opportunities that they have. There are also going to be some physical changes, or at least ideas for changes at some of these dams. I serve on the ad hoc advisory group for Oroville, and the department is undergoing a comprehensive needs assessment, which includes physical changes as well as manual changes to the flood operations that may impact the flood control system. We do understand from correspondence between the department and FERC, although the department has yet to address or brief the ad hoc committee, that the department is 129,000 cubic feet per second short of being able to handle the probable maximum flood. That's the new PMF at Oroville. So clearly, something is likely to change up there. So, and then there have also been proposals to wall off portions of spillways, which probably most affect dam safety concerns. All in your wheelhouse, a little bit outside of your wheelhouse, but not entirely so, particularly as the downstream floodways are such a critical part of making these projects work or fail. So I welcome the fact that this board is pretty smart and pretty engaged and has good relations with a lot of folks, and including other regulatory agencies or construction agencies. So that's, I just want to add that to your challenges, and whether or not that becomes an immediate part of your portfolio suggestions, I don't know, but it's going to be eventually, and maybe not too long from now. So thanks for letting me offer some small contributions, and already I think you've heard from some great folks who have who represent a lot of diverse people, which is a tribute to your board, that they and I feel comfortable addressing you, and have every expectation that we'll have productive discussions in the future.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions for Ron?
I do.
Joe?
Ron, I'm wondering if you have any concerns, as I do, frankly, that we talk about these fringe things, frankly, of reoperation, recharge, and so forth. But if we really look at the record, the tree ring record, for instance, that says that we can have droughts for 12 years or 14 years, and we have a reservoir system based on maybe 3 to 5 years of providing water supply. Shouldn't a big segment of this look be, what do we do when there's not enough water? Because it's a dream that we're going to build or operate ourselves out of this problem, I think.
I think your observations are shared by a number of us, that we are to some degree at the mercy of nature, and there's engineering solutions for some things. There are probably not engineering solutions in the context of long droughts that will continue to allow us to use 42 million acre feet of water a year when the supply just isn't there. So, that's something that we as Californians have to have adult conversations about and recognize that we will always have to confront reality and make choices in circumstances like that.
I mean, I'm just saying that it's one thing, it's fun to talk about, we'll reoperate, we'll do, all the studies show that's just very marginal increase in water supply, no matter how effective your reoperation is. It's a very marginal thing.
I have these same conversations with my study group colleagues who do, we're always, we like to be optimists, that we can solve all of our problems by just doing, some inexpensive little things. And that's not to say that those things are not warranted to do.
Right.
But we should recognize that, if you've got 2 million acre feet of overdraft in the Tulare Basin area, and you're using essentially all the water that falls, in the mountains, there's not much you can do to make more water fall in the mountains.
But what I'm suggesting is that part of this thought, of this looking at the whole system thing should be, let's think about now, how will we retreat in the face of a long drought? And what's the wisest way to do this retreat and, keep the state as whole as possible, realizing it's not going to be kept whole? Because we delude ourselves into thinking that we're going to either build reservoir storage or reoperate ourselves out of this problem. To me, it's a delusion.
Thank you, Mr. Countryman. I appreciate your honest challenge, and I largely associate myself with your remarks.
Thank you, Ron. Any other questions? Okay. Deidre Giardini, or I sure messed that up, I'm sure.
Hello, I'm Deirdre Desjardins with California Water Research. And I'm a physicist who did research at NASA Ames and Los Alamos National Lab, and I've been working on California developed water and climate